Hi, in this video I'm going to talk a bit about how to, first of all, use the whole bow, and secondly, how to do that without getting lots of bumps. Hey, if you are a regular, welcome on back. Thank you for coming, and if you are new here, please make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. It really helps me out. So a little while ago, maybe a couple of years ago, I realized that a lot of my students, not all of them, some of them are really good at using the whole bow, but some of my students would get really stuck in the upper half of the bow. And I finally figured out what it was. And the problem was that the elbow wasn't coming up. So what we need to do, and I have to really try and drill this with some students, because they have some students, their elbow just gets stuck, doesn't want to come up at all. So what I encourage students to do is to actually, let me move my chair a little bit. This is terrible lighting, isn't it? Let's change the angle here. That's what we've done. So what I tell students to do is, actually, first of all, and I've made a video on straight bowing, and so I might have referred to this a little bit in that video, but so for very beginners, I get students to do the different string levels. So we need to make sure that the elbow actually leads the bow, so not the hand moving without the elbow. So the elbow, if you lift the elbow, the hand being attached should just naturally come with it, unless you're actually resisting it, then it will stay. So first of all, we need it high, basically here for the G string anyway, right? It's going to be down here for the E string. However, once your elbow has moved your arm to a new string, then the elbow must follow the hand. So if I'm at the top of the bow here, can't really see my hand, can you? Let's do the D string or the A string here. So if I'm on the A string here, my elbow, already we don't want it down here. We want it actually quite high. It looks like it's, in the video, it looks like it's above my bow. I think in reality it's kind of in line. It's just kind of the angle of the video, I think. But it's definitely not below the bow, if you can see that difference in the upper arm here. So as I'm going along, my elbow is actually following the hand, and what it's really following is the tip of the bow, and this is what I tell my students to look at. So imagine that you've got some little googly eyes on your elbow here, and the little eyes on the elbow actually want to look at the tip of the bow. Now that felt a little bit excessive, and you've got to be really careful, because often students, I say lift your elbow and the shoulder goes up. So we've got to try and keep that relaxed. And if you do have a bit of trouble with it, just play around. So lift your shoulder and then drop it. Lift your elbow, and if the shoulder comes up, then just play around with the different movements and try and separate those two parts of the body. Use a mirror so you can really see what you're doing. So we're at the tip of the bow. The elbow's already at a decent level, and it's just going to stay up there and then follow the hand this way. So that, first of all, is going to help us get right to the bottom of the bow. If I didn't lift it, the bow would kind of want to stop around there. That's what I've noticed with a lot of students. So lifting that up. But so the way I play, this is how I teach my students. So basically, you want to use the flat of the hair all the way through here. But when we come down here, and just the way the bow is designed, it's a little bit narrower at the tip than it is down at the frog. So there's kind of more surface area there. So and also this is heavier. When we've got the bow close to the body here, there's a lot more weight and strength naturally going into it. So to get the same sound here, as at the tip is not the same feeling in the arm, it's quite different. So your arm's really far away and you're really close here. It's a thin bow, so you've got to put a lot more work here. Now if you that and keep the hair flat all of that way, we're going to get stuck down here. It gets heavy and we kind of, and I mean, I'm pressing on. Students will often lighten the bow there because they're trying to keep that even sound, and then we get some bumps in there. But it gets this crunchy sound. So then what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're actually turning the bow hair a little bit towards you, right down near the frog. And it's only this, like, here's my bow grip, maybe a little bit past there. It's just this last little portion of the bow, or this bottom portion of the bow. So what we need to do then is also be thinking of the wrist movement. So we've got, it's a little bit complicated when you're learning it. I do want this lighting to be a bit better. Let me see what I can do here. I think that's better. Yeah, let's go with that. Okay, so we have to really, this is how my basic thing that I teach students is put some roses here, some little flowers, and smell the flowers. Have a little bend in your wrist like you're holding a little bag, and if you push that out in front of you and then bring it back to your nose, I'll do it this way. So push it out and bring it back, push it out and bring it back. Yeah, so we want to get this kind of movement, and we also need to make sure that we've got our bendy thumb. It's very, very common that students will have a straight thumb and it wants to climb through. So you want to make sure that your thumb is sitting on the little seat right here. You get your little squishy bit on the end of your thumb, little pad there, that's your little thumb bum, is what I call it. And it's going to sit on the little seat, not climbing through, just sitting there. You can't see it poking through there. If I poke through, that's not what we want, right? So we want it sitting there. So then we want that bent, yeah? So we need to make sure that's bent. And that's going to give us that flexibility in the fingers. It does take time and practice to develop this. But if you're trying to get a nice movement in your bow and your thumb is straight, then that's the first thing you can think of to change and really work on. So you're not going to be able to change it instantly like that, but this is the thing to practice, right? So we've got that bend in the thumb and nice round fingers, and we want to make sure that we turn the bow a little bit towards us or towards the bridge. So it's facing this way, and then as we go down, it's going to flatten out. So naturally it'll flatten out around here, okay? And then as we're coming up, it's going to tilt again this way. And that allows us two things, well, probably more things, but for one, it allows us to get a more even tone with the bow because of the things that I mentioned before. So thinner and lighter up here, heavier and thicker or wider surface area down here. So it's going to even that out, make the surface area a little bit less because we're tilting the bow. And the other thing is it's going to make it easier to actually turn around. So instead of by the turnaround, I mean when the bow goes from the up bow to the down bow, that's a turnaround, or at the top the other way, right? So if you think of a car driving into a dead-end street that is just like no round, no turnaround thing, like just a dead end, and it goes in and then it comes out back out. It just has to reverse, right? But we don't want to reverse. We want to have what's called a cul-de-sac, like where you have a little loop at the end of the dead end street, so you can actually just turn the car in a circle shape to come around. So we want to do that with the bow. So by lifting it like this, we can actually get this kind of circular motion. So this is a thing to practice. So bringing the wrist up to the nose and then pushing it out that way. Yeah, bringing up and turning around, and it's a very circular kind of motion like this. Okay, so if we can then, so starting with the little tilt, flatten out, make sure your bow is really nice and straight, not going off in some weird angle, nice and straight here, and then coming back up here, lift the elbows nice and high, and the wrist also then comes up, okay? So So we're going down, then the wrist, and the elbow stays high, the wrist comes up. Yeah, so I went all the way to the frog, but let me just do a few long ones for you. So you'll also notice there's motion in the rest of the fingers. That's another thing that takes some practice. Can't think of the name right now. I'll look it up and put it on the screen. I'm practicing it probably a little too fast for someone who's still developing this skill. So just take your time. And although this is to develop the sound, you kind of have to forget about the sound a little bit. So if you do get some bumps, while you're in the process of getting the motion and the movement in the fingers in this little down lower half of the bow, do kind of forget about the sound. You might get some bumps and things. So obviously we do want, that's like the purpose, but to get rid of that. But you've got to be willing to go through the process of learning. Like I always talk about with students, well, I sometimes talk about, I love analogies. And so I often will talk about a baby learning to, well, either walk or either talk, doesn't really matter. So let's say talk, like when a baby starts to talk, they don't sound like this. They just make some lots of random sounds, and then eventually they start to sound a little bit like words to the family around them, but not really maybe even understood by someone else. So in that way you might think it's like you're trying to make music. That's what the purpose of what we're doing is, but at the start it just sounds like a bunch of random sounds, and to someone outside of the learning environment, they wouldn't necessarily understand what those sounds are or why they're happening. But as a teacher, like I hear it and I know what it is, right? Whereas someone outside wouldn't have a clue and wouldn't understand why, you know, and that's why, like for you as a student as well, so maybe you don't always understand why. So don't always worry about some of those different sounds, because it's just part of that process. You've got to go through the babbling stage as a baby to get to be able to talk. So you've got to go through the babbling stage on your violin, right? So, so we're coming back now to thinking about the elbow. So we'll just watch that motion a few times. So we're going with our little tilt. It flattens out. My elbow doesn't drop down. It stays up here. I keep it lifted, and you can see it's actually lifting up as the hand's coming up, and the wrist is also bent through here. So I've come off the string that time just because I was talking through that, and let me do a few more long ones for you. So hopefully that gives you some pointers to go and work with in trying to, one, get longer bows, and two, to decrease the bumps when you get to that lower part of the bow. I hope that helps you out. Please let me know in the comments how you're going with your bowing, or if there are any particular struggles that you are having with this or with other aspects of your bowing. Make sure you hit the like button if you like this video, if you got any value. And if you want some freebies, I've got a load of things. I'll link them down below. They're always on my homepage as well, so you can check that out, my homepage on my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.